Los Zetas, a Spanish word for the Z's, found its roots as a group of deserters from an elite unit of the armed forces working with the Gulf Cartel. It became one of the most powerful and feared cartels in Mexico. Demise of the organization was caused by infighting and the loss of its leaders. The Zetas split from the Gulf Cartel to form their very own organization in the mid-2000s. Using a new model of organized crime based on violence, they expanded throughout Mexico and Guatemala. Instead of corruption, they used fear as a first resort to seize and hold territory. The Zetas have become a fragmented force held together by nothing more than a name, increasingly dependent on local crime revenues rather than the transitional flow of drugs for income after rising to compete with the Sinaloa cartel. Stay tuned as we discover the rise and fall of one of the most violent and ruthless cartels in Mexico, the Los Zetas. Ociel Cardenas Guillen, the leader of the Gulf Cartel, gained regional power and recognition in Tamaulipas State, Mexico, in the late 1990s. The fact that he had so many rivals across Tamaulipas State who needed him to bend the knee or die made Guillen concerned for his life. He knew that leading the Gulf Cartel meant his future would be filled with violence and bloodshed. Thus, needing an elite bodyguard unit was a requirement. In the late 1990s, Guillen turned to Guzman, who was suggested that Mexico's military was what Guillen needed. For this reason, Guzman persuaded at least 31 men to leave military service and serve under his command in order to protect the Gulf Cartel's head. Some of these men had served under Grupo Armado de Fuerzas Especiales, GAFE, a Mexican Special Forces unit who received advanced training, needed to be equipped in a paramilitary narco army aiming to protect and serve the boss. Then the Los Zetas came into existence. Each member was represented by Z and a numeric number which represents their superiority. Los Zetas' first phase lasted from 1997 to 2004. It was defined by two major roles: protecting the principal and hunting down the enemies. The Gulf Cartel's three most trusted members are Arturo Guzman, Z1, Rogelio Gonzalez Pizana, and Heriberto Lazcano, Z3. The Gulf Cartel was able to become the most powerful drug trafficking organization when they led the majority of those covert missions into Tamaulipas cities and towns and ensured a high operational success rate. An unprecedented act of barbarism often concluded operations. Early Los Zetas members adhered to the fundamental premise of psychological operations. You might very well defeat your enemy without fighting if you scare him enough. The early success of Los Zetas mainly was contributed by the critical military training they had. The presence of the Mexican criminal system gave way to both professionalism and violence. Some rival groups needed to improve their recruiting and training to match the brutality of Los Zetas. They continued to grow and evolve as they were controlling Mexico's Gulf Coast for their boss. Los Zetas went through an important evolutionary phase in 2002 to 2004 that altered the fundamental structure of the paramilitary operative organization. On January 14, 2002, the Mexican military apprehended Gullen's primary accountant, Ruben Ceseda Riviera. On November 21st of the same year, Arturo Guzman was killed in a shootout with soldiers in Matamoros. Less than 4 months after Guzman's death, on March 14, 2003, military apprehended Gullen and Matamoros' former cop, Eduardo Costilla. Gullen's older brother, Antonio Cardenas Guillen, gradually began to fill the void left by his absence. After Guzman's death, El Calen, Gullen's chief assassin, took over the organization but was also apprehended in October 2004. After that, the group was put onto the shoulders of Z3, Heriberto Lazcano, whose acts of violence and cold calculations had earned him several nicknames, including the Executioner. Thus, Los Zetas entered its second phase of development, which lasted until January 2010, where the Gulf Cartel weakened. Los Zetas began a new mission in October 2004. It was the independence from the Gulf Cartel to assist in training and recruiting his own high-level operatives. Herberto Lescano recruited elite Guatemalan special forces units called Caibaels. He reached out to the military contacts to establish recruitment channels and increase the number of training camps in Tamaulipas, where new recruits learned the basic fundamentals of small unit tactics, firearms use, and communications and utilizing the covert radio network. Eventually, Los Zetas gained control of plazas and routes where weaker organizations must pay taxes to gain passage, enabling the organization to expand its revenue generation strategies beyond extortion. Lescano also strengthened an accounting system that would serve as the backbone of Los Zetas operations throughout Mexico and eventually into Central America. Clearly, Lescano was a visionary who understood that the strength of the organization under his command was directly related to its ability to generate and protect revenue. With these and other major decisions gave the net effect of making Los Zetas an independent organization separating itself from the Gulf Cartel. As the two organizations grew apart, the leader of the Gulf Cartel ordered the kidnapping of a Los Zetas operator in Reynosa, Miguel Trevino, the number in command of Los Zetas. A war broke out defining the third stage of Los Zetas development and the Gulf Cartel's demise. Following the setback in early 2010, the organization was ready to resume its extortion, taxation, and drug trafficking operations. And it was at this point that the true horror stories began to emerge. One reported incident involved the Mexican military discovering a mass grave containing the bodies of 72 undocumented immigrants. A new batch of mass graves was discovered in San Fernando where 193 people were found dead, believed to all be tortured and mutilated. Women were raped, and the men were forced to fight with each other to death with hammers and machetes. The survivors were forced to work as hitmen for the Zetas in 2014. Two men from the town of Allende was suspected of stealing money from the Zetas. As a result, armed units arrived and destroyed 80 homes with heavy machinery and murdered between 300 and 500 people. It is important to keep in mind that atrocities like these are a result of the drug war, which is always a race to the top. In an illegal market, the only way to gain market share is through violence, which escalates as each group seeks to outdo the previous until something similar to the Los Zetas emerges while the scale of their violence attracts the most attention. Unlike traditional cartels that focused on narcotic trade routes into the U.S., Los Zetas created a completely new business model for what a cartel could be. This is possibly due to their military background, moving into areas and then trying to hold that territory like an invading army. In addition to drug smuggling, the state has diversified, assuming control of entire black market industries and reaping huge profits. Furthermore, they engaged in local drug trade, kidnapping, car theft, and selling counterfeit goods. So, you see, it was not just a battle over the drug trade to the United States, but a battle over control of every inch of territory and all the businesses in that territory. With some justification, they challenged the Mexican government and military, claiming to be the true power in those territories. Eventually, the Los Zetas grew powerful enough to launch a sustained and extremely profitable assault on Mexico's national oil company, Pemex. What could be the reason for Los Zetas losing power almost as quickly as they gained it? One big factor is the infighting, drug war, and attempts of solving one problem while creating new ones. The Mexican Navy shot and killed Los Zetas commander Herberto Lescano in October 2012. Los Zetas was taken over by Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, the first commander who had no military experience. He was a drug trafficker, raised through the ranks by being brutal and ruthless. However, this signaled the quick shifting from military-disciplined members to thugs of random street gangsters, which deteriorated the criminal organization's unity. The group's fragmentation into several smaller splinter cells have made identifying those in positions of leadership increasingly difficult. Juan Gerardo Trevino Chavez, aka El Huevo, is the most powerful leader of the Los Zetas, according to the DEA 2017 report. El Huevo currently serves as the leader of the Northeast cartel involved in extortion, kidnapping, and oil theft. But nothing can compete with the drug trade in terms of criminal profits. The Los Zetas simply couldn't compete with the established drug traffickers, but other cartels began to mimic Los Zetas' ultra-violence and narco-terrorism. The methods and firepower of the Zetas have now been replicated by older cartels as well as newer groups such as the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, now operating with similar paramilitary ruthlessness. This is how the drug war works. One cartel begins chopping off people's heads and burning them alive. Others must follow or go even further. The race always leads to more and more intense violence. Over 35,000 people were murdered in Mexico, and the murderers continue to make billions of dollars from cocaine, meth, heroin, and weed. The new Los Zetas is unavoidable as long as there is a drug war, but we can make a difference by reporting any illegal activity to the government authorities. Remember, lives of the younger generations depend on how well we deal with the present problems of the society. What do you think of our video today? Let us know.